Before we get into the video, please consider liking and subscribing. Now, we are here to discuss the Las Vegas Raiders and the Cincinnati Bengals. Now, before we get anything, we got to congratulate the Bengals, their first playoff win, and I believe what they said was 31 years by defeating the Raiders 26-19. This game was an absolute mess. From the start, it kind of felt like this game as a whole was not pretty at times and downright frustrating at times just by the quarterback play and just some of the decisions that some of these teams and what they decided to make. Like, all in all, yeah, I was thoroughly entertained the entire time watching this football game. Like, I'm not even gonna lie. Like, if I had to watch this game over again like 100 times, oh, for sure. Like, this is a type of football game you'd want to watch again. Now, the referees, no, like, if we start with the referees, they were really bad in this game, and they absolutely botched one of the worst calls maybe in NFL history by blowing the whistle early on one of the Joe Burrow touchdown passes where he was rolling out, looked like he was going out of bounds. He was still in the air when he threw it, but as the ball was midair, the referee blew the whistle. Technically, that means the play would be dead at that point, but the referees didn't call the play dead. They let the touchdown stand, which, again, they weren't supposed to do that. The play was supposed to be considered dead at that point, so they completely botched that. Like, I don't know how you botched that, like, because these are supposed to be the best of the best referees, and they were terrible the entire night. And I was reading on Twitter, and I completely agree on Twitter, like, when they blew that whistle, I don't think it had any impact on that play and the outcome of that play. Like, I think it was going to be a touchdown either way. But I think just the fact that they botched a play like that, it seems very inexcusable, especially for a playoff game. Like I said, when we're trying to have the best possible referees in a football game and they botch it like that, that just seems very, very, very inexcusable from the referees and how they're supposed to officiate games. And again, I'm going to be that guy. I don't want to hear a single Bengals fan or Raiders fan complain, because I thought the Chiefs were on the wrong side of the officials during the Bengals game a few weeks ago, and I took it on the chin and I was like, hey, there was a lot of mistakes that could have been cleaned up. And if we're talking about mistakes, I feel like that was the story of the Raiders in this game. First, if we talk about Derek Carr, I thought he was terrible. Like, there's people that like Derek Carr but consistently crap all over Jimmy Garoppolo, which makes no sense, because in a way, like, these two there's a lot of quarterbacks where you can just lump them all into one and they're all basically the same. Now, again, I mean, I'll be on the reverse of that. I think Jimmy G's better than Derek Carr, but there's people that'll defend Derek Carr, who was absolutely terrible at times in this football game, and that he may have been fine. Even if you want to say Derek Carr was good leading up to the 2-minute drill, fine, you can say that. Well, he was good, he was average, whatever. But that last throw was just absolutely terrible. It didn't even make the end zone. Like, come on, if you're on a 2-minute drill, 4th down, and you throw it and it doesn't even reach the end zone, that was bad. I think one play can define how bad a performance was, and that was bad. And on top of that, I wasn't a fan of the 2-minute drill to begin with, because they were throwing out routes 2 yards behind, past the line of scrimmage, and I'm just thinking, like, come on. And they weren't going to get it out of bounds either, because there was a defender on the tail of every receiver. So the play calling, the execution on the 2-minute drill by the Raiders was absolutely terrible. But mistakes as a whole were terrible for the Raiders. They had so many drives in this game killed by penalties. There was one drive as a whole, like, I can't remember who benefited from it, but there was like 41 total yards of penalties. But that third quarter was a complete ref show. Like, they wanted to be known that, hey, we want to be important, when you're really not. Like, this was one of the worst officiated games of the season, by far one of the worst. And on top of that, you look at that roughing the passer call, like, that one wasn't on the Bengals. That was absolutely abysmal. That was a terrible roughing the passer call that I think at this point the NFL's got to look at that and change that rule. Like, there's no way that this roughing the passer rule can stand the way it is, because there's been so many terrible calls throughout the season. The first one that popped into my head was the Saints-Titans game earlier this year. And the call that Ryan Tannehill got, that was the first one that popped into my head. Among that, like, as a Chiefs fan, you have the Chris Jones one a couple years ago, and I think it was the AFC Championship game. And there's just constantly bad roughing the passer penalties that needs to be fixed. That penalty, I feel like, I'm sure there's things in the NFL that they want to fix. And one of them, there's two things I really think the NFL needs to fix, is the instant replay that they have going to New York, like in their ear and all that. And then the other one is a roughing the passer penalty, because those two rules are absolutely terrible. Because there was a time in this game I was frustrated because I think it was the Bengals had a challenge a play, but then the Raiders didn't, whatever. I was like, this is really stupid. Like, you have that quick instant replay, just use it. At this point, eliminate challenges, because you did it for one team, but then the very next play, you didn't do it for another team. So that was bad. On top of that, you have Jamar Chase, who I think is an absolute elite level stud receiver. He was getting away with push-offs left and right in this game. The Jamar Chase, like, that dude, as elite as he is, he has some magic in him to never get called for a offensive pass interference call. Like, that's fantastic. Like, Jamar Chase, I don't know how he does it. He's great, but props to him for him able to do that all the time. But then you look at the Bengals as a whole in this game. Now, overall, for it being the first time these guys playing in the playoffs, oh yeah, I thought the Bengals played a great game. I thought Joe Burrow, he looked calm, cool, collected the entire game. Didn't really look like he was under much pressure this game. Like, he didn't look like he was nervous. Now, there was times that in this game that I thought the Bengals should have capitalized a little bit better, and they didn't. But just as a whole, I thought it was a good performance. Joe Burrow, that first drive looking good. That last drive that they scored in the first half, which was the controversial whistle call. Everything else, like, I thought they played a good game. Now, there was going to be a time where I was like, if the Raiders do somehow come back and win this game, I know exactly why the Bengals lost this game. It was because there were so many drives that the Bengals, I should say, were deep into the red zone, and they couldn't capitalize against the Raiders. And the Raiders are the worst red zone defense in the NFL, and I was like, they're not going to capitalize on these. And I was like, if the Bengals lose, I know exactly why they lost. I mean, my opinion of why they lost, but I know exactly why they lost. Because Joe Burrow played a great game. Like, the Bengals as a whole, I thought they played a fairly good game, fairly mistake-free game. I mean, this game was ugly as a whole. The referees sucked, as I mentioned. But I thought it was a good game from the Bengals. But if they would have lost this game, I would have pinpointed exactly what it was. And there was a couple drives in the first half where they kicked field goals and they couldn't capitalize on touchdowns, especially after the Derek Carr fumble. I'm like, that's a perfect opportunity where they could have gone up 14-3 immediately in the first quarter. They couldn't capitalize on that, or they could have went up, even if it was, they could have went up 17-3. They couldn't capitalize on that. It was 13-3. I felt like the Bengals, they had an issue, in my opinion, closing out the Raiders this entire game. Now, credit to them, they came up with a clutch interception, and again, they're young. I'm not going to completely fault them, but at the same time, the rest of these playoffs, I think if the Bengals play any other team, I think remaining in the playoffs, Bills, Patriots, Chiefs, if the Steelers somehow win, I think the Bengals will blow the Steelers out. I don't even think it'll be close. But I think if the Bengals play another one of those teams and they're settling for field goals, it's going to be a long night for them, and I have a feeling they might struggle. I really do, because you against some of these teams, and I know some of these teams don't have as bad of a red zone defense as the Raiders do, and I think they should have capitalized more. But I definitely think that a lot of these teams, especially the Chiefs, these two teams, the Bengals Chiefs, are very explosive, and you don't capitalize and get touchdowns on those drives, it's going to be a long night, because a lot of these teams you can't beat with field goals. I know it's kind of a cliche for certain teams. You can't beat a lot of these teams with field goals. You really can't. So, I mean, if I'm the Bengals, I'm not worried. Their first win in 31 years. And as the meme's been going around, the Bengals, I should say, are finally able to send a text message that their team won a playoff game. That's great and all. It's awesome. But as a whole, a very, very impressive game by the Bengals. And the last note that I didn't mention was Deshaun Jackson dropped one pass that could have been a touchdown, and then another one where he caught it and then could have easily gotten another 10 yards and didn't get it. So whatever he was doing, that was really bad. So that was the last note I have from this game. But as a whole, congrats to the Bengals. I feel like they're going to have a tough road ahead, but they have Joe Burrow, who literally looks like a veteran at this point, elite level guy. If I'm a Bengals fan, I'm happy with the team that I have around. The offensive line definitely needs to get a little bit of work on it. That's going to be, I think that's the main thing they got to work on in the offseason. But yeah, great win for the Bengals. Give me your thoughts down below of what you thought of this game, and I'll see you in the next one.